Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Logical Nonsense podcast today. We have an interesting one today. For our sports section, I'm going to be going over the Pac-12, all the drama that's happened with it, kind of my thoughts on it all, just everything. I want to start this podcast off kind of by giving you guys a history on the Pac-12, just because I feel like some people, they know it's been a long conference, it's got a long history, but at the same time, not everyone knows that. So it started off in 1915, 4 schools, Cal Berkeley, Washington, University of Washington, Oregon, and Oregon State University. 2 years later, Washington State University joined, and then a year later, Stanford joined. In 1922, University of Southern California and University of Idaho also joined. And then in 1924, Montana joined and UCLA joined in 1928. University of Idaho and Montana both left the conference. In 1959, there was some drama with, financial stuff, like financial aid, that kind of thing. And this then brought the conference into something called the AAWU. This conference, basically the same conference without University of Idaho and the University of Montana. In 1968, they renamed themselves the PAC-8, and then in 1978, they added Arizona and Arizona State to their conference after them were in the WAC. So they then became the Pac-10. In 2011, they added Colorado and Utah to their conference to then become the Pac-12. Since the merger of the Pac-12, we've seen them be consistently a Power 5 conference. They've been considered a Power 5 conference. They're specifically football. They've always been a conference that has a lot of surprises. Some people say they can compete, others say they can't. Kind of depends on the year. But yeah, we've seen teams like USC, University of Oregon, UW sometimes. Like, they've had success. UCLA, a lot of teams with a lot of storied success across many sports, not just football. I mean, I know I just said just football, but we've seen a lot of teams have success across the board in many different sports, and so it's been a very successful conference with a lot of successful teams who can compete across the nation. The coolest thing about this conference, too, is it was in the West, and it had the best schools from the West. Big 12, I would say mainly a Midwest to South region, and then you have the Big 10, which is mainly just consisted of Big 10 with a few East schools, and then the ACC, a lot of Eastern schools, and then you have the SEC and Southeast. So it's always been a regional game, and then UCLA and USC had to screw it all up. I just got to get this out of the way. Fuck you, USC and UCLA. I really don't think a lot of this would have happened if they didn't get their California greed in them and want to go to a bigger, better conference. They definitely moved for the money. I don't care what they say. I know the Pac-12 has had some financial issues. There was an offer from Apple TV, which, doesn't sound like the greatest offer now that Apple TV offered them, because, what does it do? Like, you know what I'm saying? So, there's definitely, they started it all last summer. They definitely started it all. And ever since then, I think a lot of people in the conference were a little worried about the stability of the Pac-12, what would happen. And then we get news that Colorado's about to leave for the Big 12, which, again, bigger mind. Deion Sanders comes in. University of Colorado is just trying to really change their entire landscape. They used to be in the Big 12. They left for the Pac-12, which I actually thought made sense for them. Now they want to leave back to the Big 12 because, again, probably more money opportunities, as well as with USC and UCLA, many people were concerned about the stability of the Pac-12, where it was going. And so they leave. And then now I think every other big school in that conference was kind of just waiting for another person to leave. And then it breaks news that University of Utah and the University of Arizona are both going to be joining the Big 12 conference as well. And then Arizona State says they're going to. I don't remember the exact timeline, so if I get this wrong, please don't at me or anything. This is just a general. And then the biggest one, I think, that hit news that really put everyone in a panic was when University of Oregon and University of Washington both stated they were going to be leaving the Pac-12 for the Big Ten Conference, joining fellow brats in California, USC and UCLA. It's interesting. I think a lot of those schools want to say it's not about money, that it's more so about the stability of the conference and the financial reasons. But at the end of the game, at the end of the day, it's all about money. I don't think there was a lot of consideration on the student athletes. I understand it's business. You should go watch this press conference of the Mizzou coach talking about the student athletes on how a lot of kids pick local schools so their parents can go watch. Well, now, University of Oregon gonna have to play, depending on the conference realignment, who they have to play. They have to play schools in the Midwest and the East Coast that are thousands of miles away, and that's just, I don't know, it just sucks. It really wears on the mental health of the student athletes, and I think it negatively affects sports. I think a lot of people think this would bring in recruiting, and maybe it does. Bigger, better conference. Probably more visibility. If they don't care about that, but long term, they could lose recruits because they don't want to travel all the time. Who knows? But that's kind of a different snippet, different look at it, different perspective. I definitely don't like that this realignment splits the region so much. I think what was cool of what we had is, the Pac-12 represented the West. The Southeast, or SEC, represented South, and they still do. But the Big Ten, what do they represent now? The entire nation? No. They don't have every school. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. What are you guys now? You don't even... You're just... I don't know. It doesn't make sense. It used to be about regions. It used to make sense. It doesn't make sense anymore. It's all about money. It's all about stability. This whole NIL stuff... you want to really talk about what started this all. It's that whole NIL stuff. I understand a lot of people want to get paid. The deal's made. I'm not going to argue on whether they should get paid or not, but it's definitely changed the landscape. They truly are to blame for everything that's happened with the realignment, with, kids making millions of dollars before they ever step foot in a professional athlete's shoes. Everything. I feel like we are constantly making more and more moves towards money, and in a day and age where we talk about mental health and how we want to better it, I feel like we keep making strides towards making it worse. You keep bringing more and more responsibilities to these athletes. Now you're putting in a travel factor too. It makes no sense. I feel like at the end of the day, again, I know this is a business move and they're doing what they think is best for the business, but you're not going to have a team if your entire team's unhappy. And I understand, there's history and they're still going to get athletes, but I don't know, it's just something to think about. Then you got to also look at, what are these teams like Washington State? They're down to 4. Washington State, Stanford, Oregon State, and University of California. There's been talks of, those schools going to a school like the Mountain West, which would strengthen the Mountain West a lot more. All of them have good athletic programs who could bring in a lot of, recruits, a lot of revenue. But there's also been talks about a lot of the Mountain West, like schools going to the Pac-12 and keeping the Pac-12. I don't think it's worth it. I know the Pac-12 has a over 100-year history, but at this point, if you only have 4 schools from the original Pac-12, it's not worth keeping. You were at 12 schools and you lost 8. It's like trying to, it's like if the United States was down to like 12 states or something, and you know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's a really bad example, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. It's just like, I'm not saying it's hopeless, but it kind of is. I think they're better off joining other conferences. I hope they join regional conferences, unlike some of the others. I think it makes more sense, at least with University of Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado. They join conferences where their travel isn't as bad. Traveling to schools like Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, it's not terrible. But the whole UCLA, USC, Oregon, going to Big Ten just makes zero sense to me in terms of travel. I also think, it's definitely going to affect the recruiting for the rest of those 4 schools in the Pac-12. I think a big part of what, they were known for was being in the Pac-12 and, that visibility. And now that they're probably going to have to move to a quote-unquote worse conference, we'll see how they do. It'll be interesting to see if they try to apply to one of those Power 4 conferences now. I hope not. I hope they join a teams like the Pac-12 or the Mountain West, or like even like, I hope not the WAC, but hopefully the Mountain West. That's my biggest hope, just because they stay regional. And then they build up that conference. I think that conference is a little bit more respected. Do I think they could be a Pac or Power 5 conference? Probably not. But I do think, it's something to consider with them. It's interesting. It's sad, too. The Pac-12, like I said, has such a storied history across all sports. You look at basketball, the UCLAs, there's been a lot of good history and a lot of great athletic moments within the Pac-12. It's going to be weird, especially you look at like Oregon State, University of Oregon, how long their rivalry has been. Now they're not even going to be in the same conference. Same with a school like Washington State, University of Washington. Like, does the Apple Cup still happen? I don't know. It's weird. I think it's very similar to University of Iowa and Iowa State and how when they split, I think they still have their bowl game, but it doesn't have the same sort of significance as it did in the past, especially because they're not in the same conference. Before, not only are you beating a rival that's in the same state as you, but you're beating a rival who takes recruits from the same state as you. Kids from Seattle who want to stay local, they can either go to UW or they can go to Washington State. And whether, like, which school picked, you to recruit harder, like, that's kind of a competitive thing. You want to beat that other school. Same with Oregon, and it's just sad because you're really destroying a lot of history, rivalries, and the recruiting landscape is going to change so much. I think for schools like UW, USC, Oregon, UCLA, like, they're going to start attracting more and more Midwest talent than they had before, mainly because they're going to be traveling all the time to the Midwest to play schools like that. Like, very rarely are they going to be in the West area. I mean, obviously they're going to have their home games, that kind of thing, but that's only half your schedule. Your away games are now going to be in the Midwest. You might have a few in the Western region. I know football is a little different because I'm sure they're going to be playing those 3 schools, so there's 3 games out of the year that are in the West, but you have how many that are going to be in the Midwest now, especially because the Big Ten's such a big conference that a majority of their games are conference games. You don't have as many filler games as you would before. So it's interesting. Could definitely see the recruiting landscape change even more than it has, especially with NIL. NIL changed the landscape from the beginning. Different conferences get better NIL money, and that has really changed the way, especially the major athletes, the top ones, think about going to schools. Like, if I can make some money before I even hit professionals, like, I'm already building my future. And I get it from a student's perspective. I just hope they're also looking at like the whole breadth. So it's interesting, man. The other thing I wanted to bring up for our sports section, Jake Paul and Nate Diaz fight. At the end of the fight, before I go any further, I just want to put it out there. I'm so excited that Jake Paul wants to fight MMA. Jake Paul has risen to fame, and you got to give him credit. He's decent boxer. He's put obviously a lot of time into it, and he's a quick learner, and he's beat some pretty good guys. He can hang in with some very, very tough people. Nate Diaz is not a boxer, but he is one tough son of a gun, and he proved that last night. I think a lot of people expect these MMA fighters to come into boxing and just be immediately good, and it's such a different game. You're getting kicked, you're getting punched, you're getting taken down, you have submissions. There's so much more to the landscape of the UFC than there is boxing. And that's not to discredit boxing. It's undeniably harder. You just have so much more to think about. And so, to expect Nate Diaz to come into the boxing world and to beat somebody who only trains at boxing, kind of unfair. Nate Diaz is insane in how much he can take. It's in his blood. We've always seen that from him, how tough he is. And he proved it again last night. He hung in there. It was entertaining just to watch Nate Diaz, as always, mocking the entire match. And it was clear Jake Paul won, but Diaz had his rounds, man. He had his punches. He hung in there. He did well. I'm excited for the MMA match they'll have. I think Nate Diaz is gonna kick his ass. I don't think it's gonna be close. I am also interested to see if Jake Paul has a second fight with Tommy Fury, because it was a very close match, and it'd be interesting. I'm not a Jake Paul fan. I think he is not a good person, but I do respect, how quickly he's become, I'm not going to say a good boxer, but a decent boxer. He still, in my eyes, his only match he's had that was against professional boxer was Tommy Fury, and everyone else is just exhibition matches, in my opinion. Good fighters, maybe, guys like Tyron Woodley and Ben Askren, and now Nate Diaz. They're all good fighters. They're not good boxers. There's a difference. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if he can transition into MMA. He obviously was a wrestler, but again, there's more aspects than just wrestling and boxing. You have to be really good at one aspect in UFC and then good at two other, because again, there's so many things and it's got to transfer. All of it's got to transfer. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Jake Paul is definitely somebody a lot of people have their eyes on at all times, and he's kind of put that landscape, and with how arrogant he is, I don't feel bad for him. He's kind of put himself in that shoes, and so the storyline of like, oh, everyone hates me, like no one wants me to succeed, it's like, yeah, you put yourself there. So we'll see what he can do. And for our music section today, I want to talk about Cordae's new song, Make Up Your Mind. Very, very good song, actually. I really like how we got to see a different side of him. I guess groovy is a word for it. I don't know, it's very poppy. The chorus, at least. The chorus is very poppy, very upbeat, especially with the production on it, too. Very much a summer song, a very feel-good song. The vocals on from him are great. We've seen him show snippets of that, and this is the first time where we've seen him really execute it super well. And I think it's very, very cool to see him do this, be more diverse. We saw The Lost Boy do great things. It's a great album. He kind of went downhill with Bird's Eye View. But this could be the start of a comeback. He's had some good songs this year. 210s is also a good one with Anderson .Paak. Very good duo between those two. They have a lot of chemistry. And so a song like this, great verses on it, great vocals. I'd like to see a lot more of this. I'm hoping he can bring this energy into a new album. There was a time where he was considered to be one of the next front runners for taking the rap game, and I hope he can get back to that. He came out with his first kind of song that put him on the map. I'll call it Old Fellas. Definitely brought a different perspective and kind of put him on the map. And then he comes out with The Lost Boy, which is a great album in my opinion. A lot of diversity, really showed what he could do, especially with the bars and the flows. And then he drops From a Bird's Eye View, which was very underwhelming. There were some good songs on there. Again, snippets of good vocals, good things he could do, but he really didn't show that he improved a whole lot. And I think somebody who had the expectations of, somebody who could possibly take the reins kind of really underperformed. Granted, that could be expectations that caused that, but again, you still, if you're going to put, yourself on a pedestal, you kind of have to perform the next time too. So I'm hoping he can. And this kind of brings up the conversation of, when guys like Kendrick and Cole and Drake and Travis and 21 and Future and any other guys that I'm missing right now who are at the top of the rap game, who's next? And I think that's a question we constantly ask ourselves. There's been a lot of throw out, Baby Keem's been thrown out. If JID wasn't as old as I didn't realize how old he was. JID has been thrown out. Cordae for a long time was not as much anymore. I'm gonna throw him back in there. I think he has potential. I think there's other guys that I'm definitely missing right now who have the potential to be at the top. But it's a good conversation, I think. Some, more, I would say, under the water guys like Mike Dimes, Kenny Mason, we saw them both come out with pretty good projects this year. Do they have what it takes? I don't know. I think it'll be intriguing. It's an intriguing question. It's something that I think we constantly wonder and ask. Just as in sports, we're constantly looking for the next best thing. Look at Victor. We haven't really had somebody come out with a debut album that has really rocked the charts. I think the closest thing we had to that was the Melodic Blue with Baby Keem. But again, we need something, someone who can kind of come out of nowhere. It's a lot easier nowadays to do that just because of the accessibility to streaming. But we'll see. And that's kind of all I have today. It's a very short podcast. I'm definitely going to be getting some more guest stars in the next coming weeks. But the Pac-12 realignment was the biggest one I want